My hands are shaking as I stand at the top of the palace steps, and I hate that everyone can see it. The treaty is signed, the war is over, and in exactly 1 hour I will marry a man my own generals refuse to look in the eye. I am Alira, Queen of the Koran Dominion, and I have led my people through 3 years of war, through the loss of 2 moons, through nights where I did not sleep because I was too busy listening to reports of the dead. I thought nothing could frighten me anymore. I was wrong. His name is Ethan Cole. The humans call him a commander. My own soldiers call him something else, something they only whisper, as if saying it too loudly might summon him. The butcher of the perimeter. I have heard the stories so many times that I no longer know which parts are true and which parts have grown teeth with every retelling. They say he ended an entire fleet by himself in a single night. They say he does not raise his voice before he acts, that there is no warning, no mercy, only result. They say his own soldiers fear him almost as much as we do. And today, I am supposed to marry him. My sister leans close to me, her voice low so the guards cannot hear. Her name is Mira, and she is the only person left who still speaks to me like I am her sister and not her queen. You do not have to do this alone, she says. I will stand with you. I know, I tell her, but I have to be the one who walks down those steps. The peace treaty was clear. Our 2 peoples had bled each other dry, and neither side could afford another season of fighting. The humans offered a path that did not involve more graves, a marriage. A joining of 2 houses, 2 governments, 2 futures. On paper, it sounds almost gentle. In my chest, it feels like walking toward a blade. I remember the day the treaty arrived, carried by a human envoy who would not meet my eyes. I remember reading the terms twice, certain I had misunderstood. Marriage, to their commander. The same commander whose name my war council spoke only in warning, the same commander whose face I had only ever seen in blurred images taken from a great distance, because no one who saw him closely ever stayed long enough to describe him. My advisors argued for days. Some said refuse and continue the war, even if it meant losing everything. Others said accept, because a dead queen protects no one. In the end, I made the choice myself, because it was mine to make. I would rather walk toward a monster with my eyes open than let my people starve while I looked away. Still, understanding a decision does not stop your hands from shaking. The transport ship enters the sky exactly on time. I watch it descend, slow and silent, no escort of smaller ships around it, no display of strength. That surprises me. I expected an arrival built to remind us who had truly won this war. Instead, there is just one ship, landing quietly in the courtyard as if it were delivering nothing more than a diplomat with paperwork. The ramp lowers. My chest tightens. I have imagined this moment 100 different ways. I imagined armor. I imagined a wall of soldiers. I imagined a man who walked like the ground owed him something. What steps out instead is a single figure, tall, dressed in a plain dark uniform without a single weapon visible on him, walking down the ramp alone. He does not wait for an honor guard to form around him. He does not wait for anyone to announce him. He simply walks, directly across the courtyard, directly toward me, as if the distance between us is the only thing in the world worth crossing. My guards shift closer to me, hands near their weapons. I raise a hand slightly, telling them to hold. I do not know why. Perhaps because if this man truly wanted to hurt me, an honor guard of 12 soldiers would not stop him. The stories say that much, at least. He stops several paces away and bows his head slightly. It is a small gesture, simple, careful, exactly correct for our customs. Someone taught him that. Someone made sure he would not offend me in his very first breath on my soil. Queen Alira, he says. His voice is quiet, not cold, not sharp, just quiet, like a man who has learned that loud words rarely change anything that matters. Thank you for receiving me. I do not know what I expected him to sound like. Something harder, maybe. Something that matched the reports. I incline my head, the smallest amount protocol allows. Commander Cole. For a moment, neither of us says anything else. The wind moves between us, carrying the smell of the gardens behind the palace. Flowers that have somehow survived 3 years of war without anyone tending them properly. It feels strange, standing here in silence with the man my people fear more than death itself, and having the only sound between us be the rustle of leaves. I study his face, because I do not know what else to do. He does not look away from me, but he does not stare either. His eyes are steady, careful, watching me the way someone watches a door they are not sure will open kindly or violently. It occurs to me, briefly, that perhaps he is as uncertain of me as I am of him. I dismiss the thought immediately. It seems impossible that a man capable of the things he is rumored to have done could feel uncertain about anything. "Shall we begin?" he asks, when the silence has stretched long enough that even the guards are shifting their weight. I turn without answering and lead him inside, because I do not trust my voice to stay steady if I try to speak again so soon. The halls of the palace are lined with portraits of my ancestors, queens who ruled before me, queens who fought wars and signed treaties of their own. I wonder what they would think of me now, walking beside a human soldier whose reputation could curdle milk. I wonder if any of them ever felt this exact combination of fear and duty pulling in opposite directions inside their chest. Cole walks a half step behind me, matching my pace exactly, never crowding the space beside me, never falling too far back either. It is a strange kind of discipline, the way he moves. Every step measured, every motion contained, nothing wasted. We reach the receiving hall, where advisors from both sides wait to observe the beginning of our arrangement. My general, Torvin, stands near the front, his jaw tight, his hand resting near his belt, out of habit rather than any real intention. I catch his eye and give the smallest shake of my head. Not here, not yet. Cole notices the exchange. I see it in the way his gaze flicks briefly toward Torvin and back to me. He says nothing about it, but something in his expression tells me he understood exactly what passed between us, and chose not to comment. The ceremony that follows is not the wedding itself, only the formal introduction required before the marriage can proceed in 3 days' time, according to both our customs. Papers are read aloud, terms are restated, witnesses from each government sign their names beneath ours. It should feel like a formality, dry and procedural, and yet I find I cannot stop watching him from the corner of my eye, waiting for the mask to slip, waiting to see the man the stories describe. He never raises his voice. He never makes a demand. When one of my advisors mispronounces a human word and looks embarrassed, Cole simply repeats it gently, without mockery, and moves on as if nothing happened at all. It unsettles me more than any display of strength could have. When the introduction concludes, my advisors disperse to prepare the evening meal that tradition demands we share. Mira lingers near me as the hall empties, her eyes following Cole as he speaks quietly with one of his own officers near the far wall. "He is not what I expected," she murmurs. "Neither am I, apparently," I answer, though I am not entirely sure what I mean by that. Later, when the sun has begun to lower itself behind the mountains that border our capital, I find myself standing alone on the balcony outside my chambers, looking down at the courtyard where his ship still rests. The lights of the city stretch out beyond the palace walls, and somewhere among them, families are lighting evening fires, children are being called in for supper, ordinary life continuing, despite everything that has happened and everything that is still to come. I hear footsteps behind me and turn, expecting Mira. Instead, it is him. "I apologize," Cole says immediately, stopping well short of the balcony doorway. "I did not mean to intrude. Your steward said I might find a quiet place to think out here, and did not mention it was already occupied. You may stay," I say, surprising myself with how easily the words come out. The balcony is wide enough for both our thoughts. He steps forward slowly, careful, as though testing whether the invitation is genuine before fully accepting it. He stands a respectful distance away, looking out over the same city I have been watching. "It is beautiful," he says after a moment. I did not expect that. What did you expect? I ask, before I can stop myself. He is quiet for a long moment, choosing his words the way a man chooses his footing on unfamiliar ground. I expected a battlefield still smoking, he admits finally. I expected to see what 3 years of war does to a place. I did not expect lights in windows and smoke from cooking fires. We rebuilt quickly, I say. We had to. My people cannot mourn and starve at the same time. Something shifts in his expression, something I cannot quite name. Grief, maybe, though I do not understand why a human commander would grieve for losses on my side of the war. I am sorry, he says quietly, for what this war cost your people. I know an apology changes nothing that has already happened, but I am sorry all the same. I do not know how to respond to that. The stories never mentioned an apology. The stories never mentioned a man who looks out over a stranger's city and feels something other than triumph. I study him carefully, searching his face for the cruelty everyone promised me I would find. I do not find it. I find something closer to exhaustion, the kind that settles into a person after they have carried something heavy for far too long without ever being allowed to put it down. Why did you agree to this marriage? I ask. You could have refused. Your government could have chosen someone else. He turns to look at me directly, for the first time since stepping onto the balcony. I agreed, because ending this war matters more than my own comfort, he says simply. And because I did not want someone else standing where I am standing now, if there was any chance I could carry this weight instead. The wind picks up between us again, cool and steady, carrying the scent of the mountains. I do not know what to say to a man who speaks of carrying weight for people he has never met, people who fear him, people who whisper terrible names behind his back. I only know that when I finally step back inside my chambers that night, my hands are no longer shaking the way they were on the palace steps. They are shaking for an entirely different reason now, and I am not yet ready to admit what that reason might be. The 3 days before the wedding pass faster than I expect, and slower than I want, all at once. I spend most mornings in council meetings, listening to reports of grain shipments and border patrols, trying to keep my mind on matters of state instead of the man who now walks through my palace as though he has always belonged here. I fail more often than I succeed. Cole keeps a strange schedule. He rises early, before even my household staff, and I am told he spends an hour walking the palace grounds alone before anyone else is awake. He eats simply, speaks little unless spoken to, and treats every servant who crosses his path with the same quiet courtesy he showed me on the courtyard steps. I hear this from Mira, who hears it from the staff, who cannot seem to stop talking about how strange it is that the man they feared turns out to say thank you every single time someone brings him a cup of tea. On the second morning, I decide to meet with him privately, away from advisors and witnesses, because I need to understand what I am truly agreeing to before I stand before my people and speak vows I cannot take back. I choose the library, a quiet room lined with records older than either of our nation's current governments. He arrives exactly on time, neither early nor late, dressed in the same plain uniform he wore on the day he landed. "Thank you for meeting me," I say, gesturing for him to sit across from me at the long reading table. "Of course," he says. "I imagine you have questions." "Many," I admit. He folds his hands on the table, waiting, patient in a way that makes me feel almost foolish for how carefully I have rehearsed this conversation in my head. I ask him first about the border war, the battles that carried his name across every news broadcast in our territory. I ask him directly about the siege the humans call HFY, the one my own people speak of with a mixture of hatred and fear, the battle where an entire defensive line simply stopped existing in the span of one night. He does not turn away from the question. He does not look away either. "HFY was not what your people were told," he says quietly, "and it was not what my own government wanted remembered either." "Then tell me the truth," I say. "I would rather know it than continue guessing." He is quiet for a long moment, and I watch something pass behind his eyes, something heavy, something that has clearly been carried a long distance without ever being set down. There was a supply blockade at HFY, he says finally. Families were trapped inside the perimeter, your people, not soldiers, people who had nowhere else to go. My superiors at the time decided that waiting them out was more efficient than a direct engagement. They believed it would break your side's resolve faster, with fewer losses on our end. I feel something cold settle in my chest. I remember HFY. I remember the reports of the losses among those trapped there, reports my own council used for months afterward to justify continuing the war rather than seeking peace. I refused the order, Cole continues. I moved my unit in ahead of schedule, broke the blockade myself, and got as many people out as I could before reinforcements arrived. What followed happened quickly, because I did not have time to be careful. My own command called it insubordination. Your people called it something far worse, because all they saw afterward was a defensive line that no longer existed and a commander who had somehow ended it alone. I sit in silence, trying to reconcile the story I have carried for years with the one now sitting across the table from me. Why did no one correct the record, I ask. Because it did not matter to the war, he says simply. My government did not want to admit that I had disobeyed a direct order, even for good reason, and your government found the fear more useful than the truth. Fear keeps people fighting, long after truth would have convinced them to stop. I think of my own council, of Torvin's tight jaw whenever Cole's name is mentioned, of the years my people have spent resenting a man who broke the rules to save the very families they mourn. I do not know what to say to you, I admit finally. You do not have to say anything, Cole answers. I did not tell you this, so you would forgive me for a reputation I never asked for. I told you because you asked for the truth, and you deserve to have it. We sit together in the library for a long while after that, neither of us speaking, the weight of everything unsaid settling comfortably enough between us that I do not feel the need to fill the silence. Later that same day, I discover something else about him, something smaller, but somehow it affects me even more deeply than the story of HFY. I am reviewing the treaty documents with my chief scribe, checking the translated terms against the original human text before the final ceremony, when I notice a discrepancy. A clause regarding mineral rights along our shared border has been altered, quietly, in a way that benefits my people slightly more than the original draft allowed. I ask my scribe who authorized the change. She hesitates before answering. Commander Cole requested it, she says. He noticed the translation had been written in a way that favored the human negotiating team unfairly. He corrected it himself, before either delegation reviewed the final draft. Did his government approve this change? I ask. She shakes her head. He did not ask them, Your Majesty. He simply corrected what he believed was wrong, and included a note explaining his reasoning, in case anyone questioned it later. I sit with that information for a long time after my scribe leaves the room. A man capable of ending an entire defensive line in a single night, correcting a legal document in my favor without asking anyone's permission, simply because leaving it uncorrected felt wrong to him. I do not understand him yet, but I am beginning to understand that everything I believed about him before he arrived may have been built entirely out of fear rather than fact. That evening, I find him again on the balcony outside my chambers, the same place we spoke the first night. He is looking out over the city, the same way he was before, but this time there is something different in the way he stands, something less guarded. I heard about the mineral clause, I say, stepping out to join him. He glances at me, a small amount of surprise crossing his face. I did not expect that to reach you so quickly. Why did you change it? I ask. It benefits my people more than your own government's original terms allowed. Your superiors could see that as another act of insubordination. They could, he agrees, but it was an honest mistake in translation that happened to favor my side, and I did not think it was right to let it stand simply because no one would have noticed. I do not think peace built on small dishonesties lasts very long. I study his face in the fading light, searching again for the coldness I was promised, and finding instead a strange, quiet kind of honor that I did not expect from a man the galaxy calls a butcher. "You confuse me, Commander Cole," I admit. He almost smiles at that, the first real expression of warmth I have seen cross his face since he arrived. "I have been told that before," he says, "usually by people who expected someone very different from who I actually am." "And who are you actually?" I ask, before I can stop myself. He considers the question seriously, as though it deserves more than a quick answer. "I am a man who has done difficult things for reasons I believed were right," he says finally. "Some of those things earned me a reputation I never wanted and cannot fully escape, but I would rather be feared for the wrong reasons than trusted for the wrong ones. At least fear built on a misunderstanding can eventually be corrected. Trust, built on one cannot." I do not answer him immediately. Instead, I turn to look out over the city again, the lights flickering below us, like small stars that have fallen and settled among the buildings. "2 more days," I say quietly, "and then we are bound together, whether either of us fully understands the other or not." "2 more days," he agrees. "I hope, by then, you understand at least a little more than you do now." "I already do," I admit, though I do not tell him how much that admission unsettles me, because the fear I feel now is no longer about what he might do to me. It is about how easily I am beginning to believe that he never intended to hurt me at all, and how uncertain that belief makes me feel, when I have spent so long expecting the opposite. The next morning brings trouble I do not expect, in a place I never thought to look for it. Torvin requests an audience before the sun has fully risen, his expression grim in a way that immediately sets my nerves on edge. He has served as my general since before I took the crown, and I have learned over the years that when Torvin looks this troubled, it is rarely about nothing. "There is movement among the border houses," he says, once we are alone in my private study. "Several of the noble families who opposed the treaty from the beginning have been meeting in secret. I do not yet know what they intend, but I do not like the timing." "The wedding is tomorrow," I say. "I know," he answers. "That is exactly what worries me. I think of the families he means, the ones who lost the most in the war and gained the least from peace, the ones who have never accepted that I ended a conflict they believed we could still win if we simply endured a little longer. I have felt their resentment for months, quiet, simmering, never quite bold enough to become open defiance. Until now, perhaps. Keep watching them, I tell Torvin, and say nothing to the human delegation yet. I do not want this treaty threatened by suspicion before we even know what we are dealing with. Torvin hesitates, clearly wanting to argue, but he nods and leaves without further protest, which tells me more than his words ever could about how seriously he takes the threat. I do not mention any of this to Cole that evening, though I notice him watching me more closely than usual over dinner, as though he can sense something has shifted, even without knowing what it is. "Is something troubling you?" he asks quietly, once the rest of the table has been cleared and only the two of us remain. "Nothing you need to concern yourself with," I say, though even as the words leave my mouth, I am not entirely certain that is true. He studies me for a long moment, and I brace myself for him to press further. Instead, he simply nods, accepting my answer, though something in his eyes tells me he does not fully believe it. "If it becomes something I need to concern myself with," he says finally, "I hope you will tell me before it becomes something neither of us can undo." I promise nothing in return, only offer him a small, tired smile before retiring for the night. I do not yet know how quickly his warning will prove necessary. The morning of the wedding arrives with a sky so clear it feels almost cruel, as though the universe has decided to mock the tightness in my chest with perfect weather. Mira helps me dress in the ceremonial robes my mother once wore, layers of deep blue fabric stitched with silver thread that catches the light every time I move. She works in silence for most of the morning, her hands steady, even though I know she shares my unease about the reports Torvin brought us the day before. "You look every bit the queen your people need," she says finally, stepping back to study her work. I do not feel like a queen right now, I admit. I feel like a woman standing at the edge of something I cannot fully see. Mira takes my hands in hers, her grip firm, despite the softness in her voice. Then let the queen walk out first, she says. The woman can catch up once it is safe to feel again. I hold on to those words as I make my way toward the grand hall, where representatives from both our peoples have gathered to witness the ceremony. The room is filled with color, human officials in formal dark suits, standing beside Koran nobles draped in the bright fabrics reserved for occasions of great importance. Somewhere among them, I know, are the very families Torvin warned me about, smiling and bowing exactly as protocol demands, giving no outward sign of whatever they might be planning. I search the crowd for Torvin and find him near the front, his eyes scanning the room with the same careful attention I imagine he gave every battlefield he has ever stood on. He meets my gaze briefly and gives the smallest nod, telling me nothing has changed, but also nothing has gone wrong yet. Cole waits for me at the far end of the hall, standing before the ceremonial arch that has hosted every royal wedding in my family's history for generations. He wears a formal version of his uniform now, dark and unadorned, except for a single silver emblem at his collar, and even across the length of the hall, I can see the way his eyes soften slightly the moment they find mine. I walk toward him slowly, matching the measured pace tradition demands, though every step feels like it takes more effort than it should. The eyes of two entire nations follow me, weighing me, judging whether this fragile piece deserves to survive. When I finally reach him, he offers his hand, and I take it, feeling the same steadiness in his grip that I noticed the very first day he arrived. "You look magnificent," he says quietly, low enough that only I can hear it. "You look nervous," I answer, just as quietly, noticing the way his jaw is set slightly tighter than usual. He almost smiles. I am marrying a queen in front of two nations who both expect me to fail her, he says. A little nervousness seems reasonable. The priestess begins the ceremony, her voice carrying the ancient words of joining across the hall, words that speak of shared burdens, shared futures, shared responsibility for whatever comes next. I listen to them settle over the crowd, and for a strange moment, standing there with my hand in his, I almost forget the danger Torvin warned me about entirely. Almost. It is the smallest movement that catches my attention. A shift near the eastern doorway, someone stepping slightly out of position among the gathered nobles. I would have missed it entirely if I had not spent the last several days watching every corner of this palace for exactly this kind of disturbance. I glance toward Torvin, and I see that he has noticed it too, his hand drifting slowly toward his side. The priestess continues speaking, unaware that anything has shifted in the room, her voice steady and calm as she moves toward the final portion of the ceremony. I try to keep my own expression calm as well, though my heart is pounding hard enough that I wonder if Cole can feel it through the hand he still holds. Then everything happens very quickly. A shout rises from near the eastern doorway, sharp and sudden, and the crowd surges backward as several figures push forward through the gathered guests, their faces hidden beneath dark hoods, their intentions unmistakable the moment I see what one of them is carrying. My guards react immediately, moving to close ranks around me, but the attackers are already too close, already cutting through the panicked crowd faster than my honor guard can reach them. I feel Cole's hand tighten around mine for half a second, and then he moves. I have never seen anyone move the way he moves in that moment. There is no hesitation, no wasted motion, nothing that resembles the careful, measured man I have come to know over the past 3 days. He steps directly into the path between the nearest attacker and myself, and something small and metallic flies through the air, aimed directly at where I had been standing only a heartbeat before. He takes it instead. I hear the small, sharp sound of impact, see him stagger slightly, one hand pressing briefly against his shoulder before he continues moving, placing himself fully between me and the chaos unfolding across the hall. "Get down," he says, his voice suddenly carrying an authority I have not heard from him before, sharp and immediate, the voice of a man who has commanded soldiers through far worse than this. I do not get down. I cannot make my body obey that instruction, not while I watch him standing there, a dart or blade of some kind lodged in his shoulder, blood beginning to spread slowly across the dark fabric of his uniform. Torvin and my guards are already moving, closing in on the remaining attackers, and I watch Cole assess the situation around us with terrifying speed, his eyes tracking every figure in the hall, every possible threat, every path they might take toward either of us. "There are 3 more, he says quietly, to no one in particular, or perhaps to himself, calculating something I cannot follow. 2 near the north pillar, 1 trying to reach the side corridor. He moves again, and I realize he is not simply protecting me anymore. He is ending this, methodically, without cruelty, without excess, doing exactly what is necessary and nothing more. He disarms the nearest attacker with a motion so quick I barely register it happening, turning the man's own weapon aside and putting him on the ground without a single wasted movement. He does not strike to cause harm beyond what is needed to stop the threat. I watch him choose control over violence, precision over rage, even in the middle of chaos that would justify far worse from any other soldier in his position. Torvin's guards secure the second attacker near the north pillar, and within moments, the third is caught trying to flee through the side corridor, exactly where Cole predicted he would go. The hall falls into a stunned, uneasy silence, broken only by the sound of my own breathing and the low murmur of frightened guests, slowly realizing the danger has passed. Cole turns back toward me immediately, his expression shifting from the sharp focus of a moment before into something softer, something worried, entirely different from the calm control he showed only seconds earlier. "Are you hurt?" he asks, his voice urgent now, his hand reaching toward me before he seems to remember himself and stops just short of touching my arm. "I am not hurt," I say, though my voice comes out unsteady. "You are." He glances down at his shoulder as though he had genuinely forgotten about it in the moments since it happened. "It is minor," he says. "It will keep until the ceremony is finished, if you are still willing to continue." I stare at him, this man who just took a weapon meant for me without a single moment of hesitation, who is now standing in front of 2 entire nations asking whether I still wish to marry him as though nothing at all has happened. Torvin approaches quickly, his own weapon still drawn, his eyes scanning the crowd for any further threat. "The 3 attackers are secured, Your Majesty," he reports. "I recognize 2 of them. They serve House Ferran." I feel a cold certainty settle over me at the name. House Ferran has opposed the treaty from the very beginning, their lands closest to the border, their losses in the war among the heaviest of any noble family in the Dominion. I should have expected this. Perhaps some part of me did. "Take them to the lower chambers," I say, my voice steadier now than I expect it to be. "I will address this personally, once the ceremony is complete." Torvin hesitates. "You still intend to continue?" he asks, glancing briefly toward Cole's shoulder. I look at Cole, at the blood soaking slowly into his uniform, at the steady, patient way he waits for my answer without pressuring me toward any particular choice. "Yes," I say, "I intend to continue." The priestess, visibly shaken, but resolved to finish what she started, resumes the ceremony with a voice that trembles only slightly. The guests, still tense, still watching the doorways with wary eyes, settle back into something resembling order. I hold Cole's hand through the remainder of the ceremony, feeling the faint tremor in his grip that tells me the wound is worse than he is willing to admit, and yet he does not falter, does not ask for a pause, does not let anyone in that hall see anything less than complete composure. When the priestess finally pronounces us joined, when the ancient words settle over the room and the crowd begins, hesitantly at first and then with growing relief, to applaud, I look up at Cole and see something in his expression that I have not seen from him before. Not the careful diplomat, not the controlled soldier. Just a man, relieved that the woman beside him is safe, exhausted from the effort of making certain of it. "We should attend to your shoulder," I say quietly, once the formal portion of the ceremony has concluded and the guests have begun to disperse toward the reception hall. It can wait a little longer, he says. I would rather make sure you are settled first. I am settled, I insist. You are bleeding. He finally allows himself a small, tired laugh, the first genuine laugh I have heard from him since he arrived. You are a very stubborn queen, he says. You married a very stubborn queen, I answer. You should have expected this. Later, once the palace healers have tended to his shoulder and confirmed the wound, while serious, will heal cleanly within a matter of days, I sit beside him in the quiet of my private chambers, watching him carefully as though I might discover some hidden injury I overlooked. I owe you my life, I say finally. He shakes his head. You owe me nothing. I made a choice today that I would make again without hesitation, and that choice was not a debt. It was simply who I am. I think of the stories that followed him here, the fear that gripped my own counsel at the mention of his name, the reputation built entirely on rumor and distance rather than truth. They call you ruthless, I say quietly. I believed it myself, before you arrived. He considers that for a long moment, his eyes tired but steady. Perhaps I am ruthless, he admits, but not in the way your stories describe. I am ruthless only when it comes to protecting what I have sworn to protect. Today, that was you. I do not answer him with words. Instead, I sit beside him in silence, feeling the last remaining traces of my fear, finally, quietly, begin to dissolve into something entirely different, something I am not yet ready to name, but no longer afraid to feel. Outside my chambers, I know that House Farron waits in the lower chambers for judgment, that Torvin is already gathering evidence of their conspiracy, that the peace we fought so hard to build has survived its first true test. But for now, in this quiet room, none of that feels as important as the steady sound of his breathing beside me, proof that the man everyone warned me to fear chose, without a single moment of hesitation, to place himself between me and a blade meant to end everything before it had truly begun. 3 days pass before I finally allow myself to sit down with House Farron's captured conspirators, and by the time I do, Torvin has already gathered enough evidence to understand the full shape of what they intended. They did not simply want to end the marriage, he tells me, standing across from my desk with a stack of intercepted messages in his hand. They wanted to end you, Your Majesty, and place the blame on the human delegation. They believed that if Commander Cole appeared responsible for your death, the war would resume within weeks, and House Farron would rise to lead it. I sit with that information for a long moment, feeling something colder than fear settle over me. It is one thing to suspect danger, it is another to hold the proof of exactly how close I came to losing everything. And the weapon used in the hall, I ask, was it meant to kill or simply to wound? Torvin's expression tightens. It was poisoned, he says. A slow compound, designed to look like natural illness within a matter of days, so that no one would suspect an attack at all. If Commander Cole had not stepped between you and that dart, you would likely already be gone. The weight of that settles over me heavily, and for a moment, I cannot speak at all. I find Cole, later that same evening, standing alone in the palace gardens, his shoulders still wrapped beneath his uniform, though the healers assure me the wound continues to heal well. He does not hear me approach at first, lost in whatever thoughts occupy him in these quiet moments he seems to seek out whenever the day's duties finally end. Torvin told me everything, I say, and he turns immediately, his expression softening the moment he sees me. I did not want to burden you with the full truth so soon after the ceremony, he admits. I thought you had enough to carry already. I appreciate the intention, I say, though I would rather know the full truth than be protected from it. I have spent enough of my life being protected from things that were mine to carry. He studies me for a long moment, something like respect crossing his expression. That is fair, he says finally. I will not make that choice for you again. We walk together through the gardens in silence for a while, the evening air cool against my skin, the scent of night-blooming flowers rising gently around us. It is the first quiet moment we have shared since the wedding, and I find myself grateful for it in a way I did not expect. "Can I ask you something?" I say finally, breaking the silence. "Anything," he answers. "The stories about you," I say carefully. "The ones that followed you here. I know now that Ashfall was not what my people believed, but there must be other things, other battles, other choices you made that were not misunderstandings. I would rather hear them from you than continue wondering." He is quiet for a long time, long enough that I wonder if I have asked something he is not willing to answer. When he finally speaks, his voice is heavier than I have heard it before. "You are right," he says. "Not everything about my reputation is a misunderstanding. I have made choices in battle that ended lives, choices I made because the alternative would have cost more lives than the one I took. I do not regret those choices, but I also do not pretend they came without cost. Every decision like that stays with you. It does not disappear simply because it was necessary." I watch him carefully as he speaks, searching for the man the rumors described, and finding instead someone who has clearly spent years carrying the weight of every hard choice he has ever made, without ever setting any of it down. "Does it ever become easier?" I ask quietly. "No," he says simply, "and I think if it ever did become easier, that would be the moment I should stop being trusted with the responsibility at all. The weight is what keeps the choices careful." I think of my own crown, the burden I have carried since before I was truly ready for it, the decisions I have made that cost lives on both sides of this war, decisions I still lie awake replaying some nights, wondering if a different choice might have spared someone who did not deserve to be lost. "I understand that weight better than you might expect," I say. He looks at me then, something shifting in his expression, understanding passing between us in a way that feels entirely different from anything we have shared before. "Tell me," he says quietly, "not as commander to queen, just as two people who understand what it costs to hold power responsibly." And so I do. I tell him about my mother's death, sudden and early, that placed the crown on my head before I had fully grown into the person I needed to become to carry it. I tell him about the early years of the war, the mistakes I made as a young queen, still learning how to separate pride from wisdom, mistakes that cost lives I still think about. I tell him about the nights I have spent alone in my chambers, wondering if a wiser queen might have found a way to end this war years earlier, sparing losses on both sides that can never be undone. He listens without interrupting, without offering easy comfort or empty reassurance, simply present in a way that makes the weight of my own history feel, for the first time in years, slightly easier to carry. "You were young," he says finally, when I have finished. "Younger than any leader should be forced to become, thrown into decisions that would challenge even an experienced ruler. I do not think anyone in your position could have avoided every mistake. What matters is that you kept trying to do better, even when doing better cost you something personal every single time." I feel something loosen in my chest, something I have carried so long I had almost forgotten what it felt like to set it down, even briefly. "Thank you," I say quietly. "For what?" he asks. "For not telling me it was not my fault," I answer. "Everyone else has always tried to comfort me with that lie. You are the first person who has simply let me carry the truth without trying to take it from me." He reaches out then, slowly, giving me every opportunity to step away if I wish, and takes my hand gently in his. "I will not lie to you, Illyra," he says, my name sounding different somehow, spoken so plainly, without any title attached to it. "Not about this, and not about anything else. You deserve better than comfortable lies." I do not pull my hand away. Instead, I let it rest there, feeling the steadiness of his grip, the same steadiness I noticed the very first day he stepped off his ship alone, unarmed, walking directly toward me, despite everything my people believed about him. We stand together in the garden for a long while after that, neither of us speaking, the silence between us no longer heavy with uncertainty, but something closer to understanding. I still do not fully know you, I admit eventually, but I no longer feel afraid of what I do not know. That is enough for now, he says. The rest, we can learn together. Later that night, after he has walked me back to my chambers and the palace has settled into its quiet evening rhythm, I sit alone by my window, thinking about House Ferran, about the poison meant to end my life quietly enough that no one would suspect the truth, about the man who stepped between me and that fate without a single moment of hesitation. I think about the difference between the monster my people warned me about and the man who apologized for a war he did not start, who corrected a treaty in my favor without being asked, who carries the weight of every difficult choice he has ever made because he believes that weight is what keeps him careful. I think about how close I came to losing the chance to learn any of this at all, and how grateful I am, more grateful than I have words for, that he chose, in that single desperate moment in the grand hall, to place himself between me and the end of everything. Tomorrow, I know, brings its own difficulties. House Ferran must face judgment. The remaining noble families, who share their resentment, must be addressed carefully, before their anger finds another opportunity to strike. The peace we have built remains fragile, tested once already, and certain to be tested again. But tonight, for the first time since the treaty first arrived carrying his name attached to mine, I do not feel afraid of the future waiting for me. I feel, instead, something I have not allowed myself to feel in a very long time. I feel hope. The alarm bells wake me before dawn, sharp and urgent, echoing through the palace halls in a pattern I have not heard since the earliest days of the war. I am on my feet before I fully understand what is happening, pulling a robe over my sleeping clothes as Mira bursts through my chamber door, her face pale, her breath coming fast. "The lower chambers," she says. "House Ferran's supporters attacked the guards holding them. They have broken free, and they are not alone. Several other noble houses have joined them. They are moving toward the throne room." My heart drops. "How many?" I ask, already moving toward the door. "Enough," Mira answers grimly. "Torvin is gathering what forces he can, but they moved faster than anyone expected. They must have been planning this since the wedding, waiting for the right moment." I find Cole already awake and dressed by the time I reach the corridor outside my chambers, his shoulder still healing beneath his uniform, his expression sharp and focused in a way that reminds me, briefly, of the man who moved through the wedding hall with such terrifying precision only days before. "I heard the bells," he says. "Tell me what we are facing." I explain quickly as we move together through the palace, guards falling into formation around us as we go. House Ferran and their allies intend to seize the throne room, to declare the treaty invalid, to use my death, or perhaps both our deaths, as justification for resuming the war under new leadership that never wanted peace in the first place. They believe killing us will look like an act of the war reigniting itself, I say. If we are both gone, and blame can be placed convincingly enough on either side, they will have exactly the excuse they need. Cole's jaw tightens. "Then we do not let them succeed," he says simply. We reach the edge of the throne room to find Torvin already positioned there with what soldiers he has managed to gather, a force smaller than I would like, but disciplined, steady, holding the entrance against the growing sound of the approaching conspirators. "They have more numbers than us," Torvin reports quickly, his voice tight with controlled urgency. "But they are disorganized, angry rather than trained. If we hold the entrance and force them into a narrow approach, we can manage the numbers." I look at Cole, remembering the way he assessed the entire wedding hall in a matter of seconds, the way he predicted exactly where the third attacker would flee before it happened. "What do you see?" I ask him. He studies the throne room layout for a long moment, his eyes moving across the pillars, the doorways, the narrow corridor leading toward the main entrance, where the conspirators will soon arrive. "I see an opportunity to end this without unnecessary loss on either side," he says finally. "But it requires trust, from both of us, and quick decisions from your people." "Tell me," I say. He explains his plan quickly, efficiently, and I find myself understanding immediately why my own war council always struggled against tactics like his. He does not intend to meet the conspirators with overwhelming force. He intends to use the narrow corridor to control the confrontation entirely, allowing Torvin's disciplined guards to hold the choke point while he and I remain visible at the throne, proving publicly, immediately, undeniably, that the story House Ferran intends to tell is a lie before it can ever take root. They want to kill us and claim the human delegation is responsible for reigniting the war, I say, understanding fully now. If we stand together, visibly, unharmed, in front of witnesses from both our peoples, their entire plan collapses before it begins. Exactly, Cole says. This is not only a fight to survive, it is a fight to make certain the truth reaches everyone in this palace before House Ferran's version of events ever has the chance to spread. Torvin nods slowly, already understanding the value of the plan, even as it defies every instinct that tells a soldier to retreat a queen from danger rather than place her in full view of it. It is dangerous, he says, looking at me directly. You would be exposed. I know, I answer. But hiding gave House Ferran exactly the opportunity they used at the wedding. I will not make that mistake again. We take our positions as the sound of the approaching conspirators grows louder, angry voices echoing off the ancient stone walls of the palace. The sound of a faction that has convinced itself violence is the only remaining path toward the future they want. When they finally reach the throne room entrance, the leader of House Ferran, a nobleman named Corvath whose family lost 3 sons in the war, steps forward first, a blade in his hand, his eyes burning with a grief and fury I recognize immediately, the same grief I have carried myself in quieter moments over the years. You should be dead, he says, his voice raw. The poison should have finished what the dart began. I stand my ground beside Cole, refusing to let my voice shake, despite the fear still pulsing through me. I am not dead, Corvath, I say clearly, loudly enough that every witness gathered behind him can hear it plainly. And the human commander you accuse of endangering this peace is the very man who took that poisoned blade meant for me. Ask your own people what they witnessed in that hall. Ask them who moved to protect their queen, and who moved to end her life. I watch uncertainty ripple through the gathered conspirators behind Corvath, several of them exchanging uneasy glances, clearly less committed to this cause than the man leading them. He lied to you, Cole says, stepping forward slightly, his voice steady, carrying easily across the room. Every story you were told about Ashfall, about my reputation, about what I intend for your people, was shaped by men who found fear more useful than truth. I did not come here to end this war through violence. I came here because I believe your people and mine both deserve a future that does not require more graves to secure it. Corvath's grip tightens on his blade, his eyes flicking briefly toward the soldiers behind him, sensing perhaps that his support is beginning to waver. My sons died believing this war could still be won, he says, his voice breaking slightly. I will not let their deaths mean nothing. I feel a deep and genuine sorrow rise in my chest, understanding fully now the grief driving this man's actions, even as I cannot allow it to succeed. Their deaths do not have to mean nothing, I say gently, stepping forward despite Torvin's sharp intake of breath behind me. But continuing this war will not honor them. It will only create more families who understand exactly the grief you carry now. Peace is not a betrayal of what they died for, Corvath. It is the only way to ensure no other family loses what yours has lost. For a long, tense moment, no one moves. Corvath stands frozen, his blade still raised, his eyes moving between me and Cole, searching for some sign that everything he has believed for years might genuinely be wrong. Then, slowly, one of the soldiers behind him lowers his weapon. Another follows. The unity Corvath relied upon begins to dissolve, piece by piece, as his supporters recognize the truth taking shape in front of them. Corvath, I say quietly, one last time. Put down the blade. Let this end here, without more loss than your family has already suffered." For a moment, I believe he might not listen. His hand trembles around the hilt of his weapon, grief and fury warring visibly across his face. And then, finally, something in him breaks, not into violence, but into exhaustion, into the realization that he has been carrying a war that no longer needs to be fought. He lowers the blade, letting it fall to the stone floor with a sound that echoes through the suddenly silent throne room. Torvin's guards move quickly to secure him and the remaining conspirators, though the confrontation ends without the loss House Farron clearly expected to cause, and without the loss they themselves might have suffered in return. Cole's plan succeeds exactly as he intended, proving the truth loudly enough that no lie could ever hope to compete with it. In the days that follow, House Farron faces judgment, not through violence, but through the same careful, deliberate process that has governed my rule since I first took the crown. Corvath's grief, while understood, does not excuse the danger his actions posed, but I choose mercy over harsh punishment, understanding that another grieving family, made bitter through unfair treatment, could easily become tomorrow's conspiracy in turn. The remaining noble houses, who witnessed the confrontation in the throne room, spread word quickly of what truly happened, and slowly, carefully, the fear that once surrounded Cole's reputation begins to soften into something closer to respect, even among those who once whispered his old title with dread. Weeks later, standing once again on the balcony outside my chambers, the same place where we first spoke honestly to one another on the night he arrived, I find myself looking out over a city that finally, truly, believes in the peace we fought so hard to secure. Cole joins me quietly, his shoulder fully healed now, his presence beside me no longer something I brace against, but something I have come to welcome. "Your people are singing in the streets tonight," he observes, listening to the faint sound of celebration carrying up from the city below. "They are celebrating a peace they finally believe will last," I say, because they saw for themselves that the man they feared was never truly the danger they believed him to be. He turns to look at me, something warm and steady in his expression. "And what do you believe?" he asks quietly. I consider the question seriously, thinking of everything that has passed between us since the day I watched him walk alone across the courtyard toward a queen who was certain she was meeting a monster. "I believe," I say slowly, "that I came to this marriage terrified of a man everyone called ruthless. And I have found instead a man who is ruthless only in his devotion to protecting what he has sworn to protect, careful in every choice that matters, honest even when honesty costs him something personal. I am no longer afraid of you, Ethan Cole. I do not think I have been afraid of you for a long time now." He reaches for my hand, and I let him take it, the same steady grip I first noticed on our wedding day, the same grip that never once wavered, even as a poisoned blade found his shoulder instead of my heart. "I am glad," he says quietly, "because I intend to spend a very long time proving that belief was well placed." Below us, the city continues its celebration long into the night, two peoples who fought each other for 3 long years, now finding, slowly and carefully, the beginning of something neither side believed possible only a season ago. And standing here, beside the man my own advisors once warned me to fear above all else, I finally understand what my instincts tried to tell me from the very first moment he stepped off that ship alone, unarmed, walking directly toward me, despite everything the galaxy believed about him. Some reputations are built entirely out of fear, but the truth, when you are finally brave enough to look for it, is almost always something far more worth trusting.